Number 14. Besides the intellect, the power of concentration is a very important quality, which few people acquire except through education. It is true that it develops naturally to some extent, but people are not likely to acquire enough concentration without a long period of intellectual education. There are three qualities which distinguish perfect concentration from imperfect concentration. Perfect concentration should be intense, prolonged, and voluntary. Intensity is illustrated by the story of Archimedes. He is said to have taken no notice when the Romans came to kill him, because he was absorbed in a mathematical problem and bent on solving it. To be able to concentrate on the same thing for a long time is essential to difficult achievement. As long as the object is of great interest, this is brought about naturally. Most people can work on a mechanical puzzle for a long time, but this is not in itself very useful. To be really valuable, the concentration must also be under the control of the will. I think it is above all the control of the will that is nurtured by education.
Number 15. The Japanese often say to me, "Do you have anything that bothers you here in Japan?" To be honest, I have. It is the Japanese unconscious habit of classifying everything into ranks. Which is better, they ask, America or Japan, California oranges or Mikan, and so on. People everywhere do this to some extent, but the Japanese more than others. What is the matter with these questions? Needless to say, there are times when one product is superior to another. It is possible, then, to compare two things of the same kind in price in order to judge their quality. But there is no saying whether peaches are better than apples, or whether blue is better than green. A person may prefer peaches to apples, but he can't categorically say that the one is better than the other. Many a thing in life can't be categorized so simply. Take Japanese and American cultures, for example. It is foolish to say that American culture is inferior to Japanese culture. They have different histories, languages, manners, and customs. It is impossible to say that one is better than the other. When one is not aware of these differences and makes a value judgment, it gives rise to dangerous misunderstandings.
Number 16. A. All the people on the planet are dependent on each other. In other words, all of us are connected with each other in many ways, even if we are ignorant of the fact. Your actions make an impact on others, just as their actions make an impact on you. Some of the things you did today, no matter what they might be, may have badly influenced other people, although you were not conscious of it. Roughly speaking, if you took a 15-minute shower, you probably used about 105 gallons that other people in dry areas of the world need to drink. B. Generally speaking, it is no easy matter to be a giant. All kinds of problems arise that smaller animals or plants don't have to cope with. Giant animals, for example, have a problem with support. Suppose we take a racehorse and double its height, length, and breadth without making any other changes. Then we will have made a creature that could not possibly get to its feet, let alone run. The reason is that in accordance with the increase in size, its weight increases. The larger and the heavier an animal becomes, the thicker its legs need to become in proportion, simply to carry the weight. That is why the legs of an elephant are so thick.
Number 17. The question at issue as to whether to inform a patient of his having cancer shows an important cultural difference between Americans and Japanese. Americans believe in the right of the individual to know what is wrong with him so that he can make decisions for himself. Doctors, family, and friends are not allowed to deprive the individual of this right. In Japan, on the other hand, what counts for much is not the right of the patient, but the duty of the doctor and family to protect the patient from unnecessary mental suffering. Therefore, it follows that the wishes of the family take the place of those of the patient, and the doctor's will comes before the patient's right to know, and the patient's right to know is all but ignored. The patient is supposed to obey people around him.
Number 18. Every European knows that in Europe, wealth could only be acquired at the expense of other human beings. To a European, money stands for the freedom to act at will, which also means that he says, I want to have as much money as I can, and others to have as little money as possible. In the United States, wealth was also acquired by stealing, but the real victim was not other human beings, but poor Mother Earth and her creatures. The Indians were driven out, for they had never realized the potential riches of their country. Thanks to the natural resources of the country, every American, until quite recently, could look forward to making more money than his father, so that if he made less money, the fault was his. He was either lazy or foolish. What Americans think much of is a man's power to make money. And a rich American is proud of being able to make a financial contribution to a variety of things. In no society in history have rich men given away so large a part of their wealth. On the other hand, a poor American feels guilty about being poor.
Number 19. When a human infant comes into being in any community in any part of the world, it has two things in common with any other infant. First of all, newborn children are completely helpless. Apart from a powerful capacity to draw attention to their helplessness by using sound, there is nothing the newborn child can do to ensure his own survival. Without care from some other human being, be it mother or father, an infant is not liable to survive. This helplessness is characteristic of a human infant and is in contrast with the capacity of many newborn animals to stand up within minutes of birth. They don't even have difficulty running with the herd within a few hours. Since young animals are certainly in danger, sometimes for weeks or even months after birth, compared with the human infant, they quickly develop the capacity to protect themselves. However, the human infant is in need of others for a very long time. During this long period, the human infant develops the second feature which it shares with all other human infants, the capacity to learn language. It goes without saying that language is specific to and indispensable to the human race.
Number 20. A. Clothes are always interesting to study, not only because they reveal the taste of the wearer and to some degree his character, but also because they tell us something about the period in which they were worn. Fashions change constantly, and at first sight they may seem to change at random. However, actually there is a reason for every change. It is not too much to say that clothes reflect the thoughts and habits of the time and change with them. B. We never move about a great city without noticing the large number of people who seem to have nothing urgent to do. Although most of us complain of lack of time, the streets are crowded with people who stand in line to buy what are not necessarily in need. Every day the stores are filled with women who don't seem to be in a hurry to return home. They look around from one department to another at leisure. Yet if any of these people were asked to do something they don't feel like doing, more often than not they would say that they were afraid they had no time to spare.
Number 21. I am often asked what living in Japan is like. Today, some 12 years after coming to Japan, I can say that living here is very comfortable. I feel at ease. But this was not always the case. The first time I came to Tokyo, I went through a culture shock. The reasons were very simple. I spoke no Japanese, I had no close friends, I could not cope with the cultural differences. But after taking a trip around the world in the summer, I was determined to try my best to adapt myself to living in Japan instead of giving up. And I have never regretted this decision. For today, I am as happy as ever in Japan. Now I can speak some Japanese, and I enjoy talking with some of my Japanese friends. One of my great pleasures in Tokyo is reading the Japan Times every morning over coffee, before watching the news on TV. Because it deals with a lot of international news and has fewer advertisements, I think highly of it. By comparison, most American papers make much of local news and devote most of their space to advertisements for food and clothes. And speaking of food, I prefer Japanese food to American, especially Japanese bread.
Number 22. You may well ask what the point of being educated at university is and how it differs from education received at high school. Well, I would answer that the aim of receiving education in general is to prepare for life in the world. Leaving our family, we must set off into the wide world. With a view to learning something about the world, we make a more special preparation at university than at high school. What is this special preparation? It may mean training for a particular job, but such training is not necessarily given at university. Strictly speaking, this special training is given after having graduated from university. The special training given by university is not so much a special training of skills as a special training of the mind. It enables the students to have variety in their work and interests. The knowledge provided by university should not be too broad, or else the knowledge gained there will be shallow. However, it should be comprehensive enough to enrich the mind by getting in contact with the world outside and with other minds. The purpose of this study isn't just to learn new facts, but to relate them to each other in order. We have to aim at understanding and wisdom.
Number 23. At present, in the most civilized countries, we take freedom of speech for granted. We are so accustomed to it that we look on it as a natural right. But this right has been acquired only in recent times by struggling for it at the risk of life. Human societies have been generally opposed to freedom of thought, much more to freedom of speech. The average brain is lazy by nature, and it is apt to take the way of least resistance. Ordinary men persist in beliefs which they have accepted without questioning, and they are attached to them. Instinctively, they don't approve of anything which is not familiar to them at all, because it threatens their very being.
Number 24. The world is running out of oil, and energy experts are worried about the probability that we will be faced with a serious shortage in 10 years. Not only is each individual using more oil than ever before, but the population explosion means that each year many more people will be using oil in some form or other. Until recently, we took oil for granted. It seemed it would last forever. The increase in the price of oil has brought the world to its senses. Governments are searching for other sources of energy, but so far in vain. They are considering how they can make better use of the two other major fuels, coal and natural gas, but they have found that neither can take the place of oil in their economies. In recent years, there has been a growing concern for the environment, and coal is not popular with environmentalists. Natural gas, the purest of the three fuels, is the most limited in supply. The answer would seem to lie in nuclear power stations, but their dangers are so great. It was not until recent years that the danger began to come home to people.
Number 25. When we have a holiday in prospect, we make plans in advance in order that we may know where to go and what to do and get everything ready for it. If we don't do this, the greater part of the holiday is wasted. The same holds true of our spare time. It is a good thing to make a list of books which you want to read at your convenience. You may choose books for yourself or have your friends recommend them. At any rate, make it a rule to have a few books at hand which you are anxious to read. I think those who are not in the habit of doing so lose the pleasure of reading when the spare evening or the long railway journey or the rainy day comes. The habit of planning is no less essential to the finding of real pleasure in reading than it is to the other pleasures of life, such as traveling.